Hey everyone, thank you for joining. This is Abhi Nirkar, and today we'll be presenting a webinar on replacing EPMA after the 11.2 upgrade. So thank you everybody for joining. Hope everyone is doing well. Hope you and your family are all healthy. And, I know it's kind of like a tough time for us all globally. And, hope you're all lucky enough to, enjoy working from home. And if not, just, continuing to brush up on technical skills and, things around the house as we are. So definitely glad to have you guys all on the call and joining us today for this presentation. Today, we're going to talk about replacing EPMA. And of course, if you don't know already, that Oracle's released the 11.2 version for on-premise. And with that upgrade, our beloved EPMA is going away. So what we want to do is give you guys a few options for what's going on within the set of options that are available for replacing EPMA, and a few other, important things to think about. So just before we get started, down in the Zoom panel, there is a question and answer box where you can input some questions as the meeting goes on. And what we'll do is just try to stop and get through those, even through the session. So feel free to kind of just plug away and, type any questions you can, and we'll do our best to answer those. And just get started. So, like I said, my name is Abhi Nirkar, one of the managing partners and co-founders here at EPMware. And I'll give you a little background on myself. Originally, I started off as a SAP and Hyperion consultant, been in the Hyperion world for roughly about 15 years. And, the idea for EPMware came about from our experiences within the Oracle Hyperion industry. So we've worked as, architects, consultants, support folks, industry folks for quite some time. So it's, we've been around for a while, and the idea for creating a holistic metadata management, data governance product was something that we always wanted to do and introduce based on gaps that we've seen. So, while we originally started with a product to help manage metadata on Oracle Hyperion, we've transitioned now into providing a full technology agnostic platform. So that platform is available on-premise as well as a SaaS cloud offering. So that is hosted on AWS. We also offer consulting, work with a number of global consulting partners to implement EPMware. And of course, training and support is available with one of our partners, KeyTeach, as well as custom training programs available from us. Support for us is, pretty standard, 24/7, put in a ticket on the website, and, based on priority, we keep things moving. So, again, a little bit about history about the company. Launched back in 2014, so we're relatively new to the space as a software company. But again, we bring to the table, decades of experience in ERP and EPM applications. So EPMware now, over the course of the last few years, has transitioned from on-prem only to a SaaS cloud offering, which is capable of managing metadata for on-prem and cloud applications together. So little bit about what exactly is EPMware. So EPMware is a software solution that's designed for the business user to have a little bit more integration and interaction with metadata and data governance. So what we've seen in the past for ERP, EPM applications is kind of what we'll focus our conversation on today, is that there's a large technical dependency on how metadata is created and how that metadata flows from the business user over to the target applications. And so what we've seen is that um, that metadata needs quite a bit of massaging. Sometimes applications are not always rationalized across the board, and typically what we see is users log in and either email a request or they'll create something in Excel or SharePoint and push it over. So EPMware solves that by allowing users to log into a web-based application, create a request, and synchronize that across the board. And then we have a deployment engine which pushes that metadata out to target applications. So we are the source of truth for enterprise master data management when the application is up and running, right? So again, you might be familiar with products like this within the Oracle Hyperion space. There's like DRM, there's EDMCS on the cloud, and outside of that, Informatica, MDG, and SAP, Informatica, MDM, SAP, MDG, so many acronyms, I can't even keep up with them anymore. There's quite a bit of options that are out there. And so, for us, what keeps us different from the pack are, we have target system adapters that allow you to very easily import your application and stage your application hierarchy on day one. So not many folks have this target integration available. And that's something that we created to differentiate ourselves. So that means that when you press deploy in EPMware, it automatically pushes that metadata out to that target application using the supported APIs that are available in that target app. And so what happens is that now you have a full end-to-end understanding and of what the request was that was created, when it deployed, and whether it was successful or not when it was deployed. And that kind of reminds us of how EPMA also used to work. Obviously, there wasn't a governance layer there, which allowed end users to log in and to request changes. But that's kind of the new change that we've introduced. And of course, there's varying levels of usage when it comes to governance, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So one of the core issues that we solve by using EPMware is the issue where metadata sometimes is inaccessible, inaccurate, or untrustworthy. And there's a number of reasons why this can happen. But the end result really is that metadata that's incorrect results in incorrect financial results across applications. And that's not something that, a position that we ever want to be in, because, where we can introduce levels of governance and validations, we always should. And through many different implementations that we've done, we've seen, homegrown type of validations that are put into different levels of sourcing of metadata. So sometimes it's either in Excel or SharePoint forms, but sometimes what that results in is still in a manual process. And in that manual process, we can always introduce errors. And in some cases, there are just too many touch points to be able to remember, which application needs a certain property that's flagged or a certain user-defined attribute that's totally set. And so here you can see kind of like a, little spaghetti integration of, how a request will typically get to our target apps. And sometimes, we tend to lose time in maintaining this across a number of different applications. Of course, it's not the most efficient process, but it can also be a very error-prone process. And of course, you see requests that start off at the end user and they get into technical administrators that need to understand what that request is. Like, for instance, I need a new cost center, and now that cost center needs to not only go to my EPM applications, but it needs to go to my ERP applications, and it may have different roll-up positions in different applications and different properties. But the end user doesn't always know what level of detail to specify when they're creating that request. They may not always be aware of, how many alternate hierarchies are there? What are the total number of applications that this is going to impact? And that's really what we look to solve here in EPMware, is to try to create, like a controlled and governed change process, where users can kind of go back to and understand where metadata originally originates. So for EPMware, we can have metadata that acts as a source. So you can have that metadata load into EPMware, or even users can log in and author metadata directly within a EPMware request. So it depends on how the application environment or the landscape at an organization resides, or what the workflow and the governance process is. But we can create a level of automation or even manual request processes within EPMware to make sure that, where we need controlled audit and governance, validations and mapping, we do keep that process intact. So just a few notes about our target adapters. Of course, you see a lot of Oracle over here. All the Oracle on-prem and cloud applications are supported. And of course, the newer applications within the EPM practice are also supported. So OneStream, Anaplan, Workday, SAP, of course, Power BI, Salesforce. So a lot of the applications that we see where metadata is typically shared are fully supported in EPMware. And again, you can get those up and running on day one through the use of their APIs. Some of the customers that we've helped along the way, and of course we'll be sending out this slide so that we can, you can read up on this a little bit, and if you want to discuss some of these use cases, we're more than happy to do so. So going back to our webinar topic real quick, EPMA is gone from version 11.2 going forward. So, if some of EPMA has been around for quite some time, and, in the early days was not that stable of a product, unfortunately. Even for myself, I know that, lost quite a bit of time trying to get it to work when it was first released. Sometimes metadata would just simply disappear. But it's stabilized quite a bit over the years, and it has been, an option to allow multiple applications to reside and maintain metadata either within a local or shared library, right? So now with this being gone, we want to think about a few things like, what are the options for metadata management after the upgrade? If we decided to have EPMA features back, what do we need to build, or what do we need to rebuild, either from a technology point of view, from a process point of view, to get those features back? What aspect of EPMA is no longer going to be available in 11.2? Right? Is Oracle Cloud on our future roadmap? I know plenty of us are starting initiatives with applications like PBCS, FCCS, or ARCS, which are doing pretty well, and are a very common introduction as part of a hybrid landscape. So many folks that we work with have HFM and Essbase, and they'll have like a PBCS application that they're using for planning. So a hybrid landscape is a very, very common a landscape that we deal with when we manage metadata. And of course, how do data governance requirements impact the decision? And we want to think about, what do we have right now for data governance? How do we manage our review and approval process? Do you do that via Excel, SharePoint, or is it, just emails kind of going back and forth? Is there a requirement to, one day centralize that in a product? And of course, again, not every customer is going to need a full set of review and approvals. I mean, there's a lot of private companies out there that we work with that, simply have very, very basic workflow. So, very subjective. Major features that we used in EPMA. And again, why we loved EPMA, again, were for features like, shared library, of course, the local application view. And we've seen a lot of folks really just stick with a local application view. Shared library, of course, was good, but if you had hierarchy differences between applications, it was just tough to manage those. So, there was a little bit of effort. It wasn't really a single point of change unless you had a rationalized hierarchy. But EPMA was a great first step that was introduced by Oracle to allow metadata to be aligned. One thing that I really liked about EPMA was that it had the validate applications and default property settings that the classic metadata applications, metadata managers would have. So this means that when we deployed an application from EPMA, it would validate that application before it pushed it out to the target app. Now that was great because you didn't have a bunch of kickouts, but if you wanted to see what was kicking out, you would be able to validate that application and then choose to deploy it. Another one was comparing applications. What changes did I make in EPMA? Because there wasn't, like a visual audit trail. And that change would compare it with what was deployed in production application. So that was pretty cool. And of course, the direct deployment, right? So you can just click a button and that metadata would be pushed from this user interface directly out to the target app. So that was good. You didn't have to deal with any flat files to manage that metadata. Right, so now after upgrading to EPMA, to 11.2, Oracle is giving us an option to use a DRM Light. So if you don't know what DRM is, it's data relationship management. It's a product to manage metadata, but it was available for purchase before only, but now there's a light version. So what you get with that is a DRM Light, which you can use to stage your applications and your hierarchies. You do get steward roles for max 5 users. There are some migration utilities and scripts and guides that are out there, but again, what you have to remember here is that you do have to put this together or have a consulting partner help you out with putting this together. Unlike the fully licensed DRM, what you do not get is reading or feeding from any other applications, data warehouse, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have in EPMA any type of interface tables that were feeding EPMA, which I've seen quite a bit, that is not going to be an option going forward. Of course, what we also do not get are the governance capabilities from DRG. So there's no review and approve capabilities there. So you're, in addition to that, no DRM analytics, or even what we've heard is that there may be a limit on the number of nodes. Again, we're not sure. This is probably something you should check with your Oracle rep on and find out what the max numbers are over there. But we've heard from some customers that there may be a limit to that. So rebuilding EPMA-like functionality. Now, one of the biggest things for folks that were using using EPMA or even using classic metadata management in the past were having the ability to have validations run immediately. So not having to remember or write these validations. And so one of the issues with going to DRM Light is that you have to write these validations over again. And there's quite a bit of validations that has to be written. in order to, kind of get the same user look and feel before pushing that metadata out or extracting that metadata from DRM Light. So some of the examples here are, for HFM, invalid characters, member naming conventions, associations, required dimensions. I mean, we've heard that quite a bit of trouble to get even HFM sorted out in DRM Light with the custom top members that you have to set up. So there is quite a bit of setup again, and you can always give this a shot and try setting it up and getting it going. Same thing for planning, alias, member name checks, attribute dimensions, and these are just some examples, but there's quite a bit here. We've added a link over here so you can follow this link, and there's some documentation to EPMA validations that were available with the app, so you can figure out what those were. But the work there is to rewrite those again from scratch. Again, the direct deployment is also a pretty major thing. So for DRM specifically, there was no deployment that pushes metadata directly to target applications. You have to build your exports, or I think they may have some supported flat files that can be created, but that's a manual process here. For EPMware, as I said, we have a deployment engine where as soon as you register an application, it'll push that metadata directly out to the target app, kind of like how EPMA does. So it validates the metadata and then also pushes it out. So if you were using interface tables, again, here's an example of how some interface tables were used, for sourcing dimensions and then how they were mapped to target applications in EPMA. So if you're using this, you want to think about how you're going to continue an automated feed of metadata to your target applications. And so some of the larger engagements that we even worked on in our past have used this, just because there are, let's just say you're sourcing metadata from your ERP. You may have your chart of account segments pushing directly into EPMA using this method. So, that's a common use case that we even see in EPMware. If you're not using this, then, you might be using ODI. But again, we see a common example is, either you're using EPMware or ODI to replace this automation. So after going to the upgrade, another option you have is to simply stay in classic mode. And if you decide to do that, there's a few benefits to doing that. You may be able to write validations for your applications, for your functional validations. Of course, going back to the classic method means that you'll be managing metadata. Here for HFM, for example, is XML or app files. And here's the classic metadata manager. But, again, this can be prone to errors, of course, if there are other, user-defined fields, as you see here, that need to be populated based on the metadata that's being added to this application. That's something that you have to remember, or an administrator has to remember. And that kind of goes back to where errors and issues are introduced when you're managing these applications. So sometimes, you can always get a property that's flagged incorrectly, or even an invalid character that gets added into member names. And even sometimes you can, enter a member name or a description one way and another way into another application. So if you're managing a few set of applications, then staying in classic might very well be an option, right? And again, if there are a low number of metadata changes every period or every quarter, then again, this might work. So, again, staying in classic is always an option. So what we prefer, obviously, is you take a look at EPMware. So EPMware, when replacing EPMA, again, it's available to deploy metadata on-prem and on the cloud. So not only are you able to push metadata to all your on-prem and cloud applications, but you can also push metadata to interface tables or data warehouse as well. Again, with EPMware, you do get an application that gives you a dashboard, tells you the position of a request as it manages metadata for multiple different applications. Derivations, validations are all possible using our logic builder engine. And it really gives you a full-fledged data governance platform to manage metadata, not only within your request process to production, but you can also layer in UAT instances as well, if you wish. Again, what is not included is a limited use license, of course. So EPMware does cost a license fee, and for replacing EPMA is a minimal license fee. And we also do not charge a per node fee as well. So you can use EPMware and add as many nodes as you want to be able to take advantage of the entire dimension or full granularity of the metadata or the dimension hierarchies that you wish to manage without having to worry about the number of nodes that you're going to be managing. So converting to EPMA from EPMware, it really can be done in less than 1 week to just simply get off of EPMA and to move into EPMware. So steps to get in there are really finish your upgrade to 11.2. And once that's done, your applications are in classic mode. And once those applications are in classic mode, you can simply register those applications in EPMware. And you can click a button right here, as you see, to import that application directly into the EPMware application. So now what that does is it reaches out, it takes an extract of the application and gives you a fully staged hierarchy with the properties as you were to see in EPMA. What's also available at that point are your standard validations and your direct deployment to the target application. Now, what folks typically think about then are, do we need to map our applications together? So, in EPMA, when we used to create a shared library, it's kind of similar to that, where you can say, I have, 4 Essbase applications and 1 HFM app. Now, I want to make sure that if I make a change in my HFM app or one of my Essbase apps, that same change should be replicated across the board to every single application. And you can configure EPMware to do that for you. So again, that's optional. And some folks decide to say, we can just move over to EPMware and, we'll decide what our mapping looks like, what our workflow process looks like, maybe in a phase 2 or learn a little bit more about EPMware and then get it up and running. But at the very least, you've got a supported process to be able to create metadata, visualize what that look and feel of that metadata is going to be before we deploy it, have the validations run, and then push that out to the target app. In addition to that, next stages, of course, are to add levels of governance and auditability. So you can always say, all right, well, now we're ready to add governance stages and so reviewer and approval stages. And we can release this out to the business users to input their metadata requests directly in EPMware and then submit it to your technical team for enrichment or review of that metadata before it's pushed to any of the target apps. Of course, advanced governance and mappings are definitely possible, and we'll jump into a live demo, and I can give you kind of walk around, a look and feel around of what that looks like. So future state strategy, something that we want to think about, regardless of the option that we choose. There is going to be some type of consulting effort and a licensing impact, right? Whether you go with DRM Light, obviously there's going to be a consulting effort to getting all those validations up and running, getting all of your hierarchies in, and then building the exports out to the target app to mimic what EPMA was doing. Otherwise, you are introducing a process where you're going to have manual intervention to manage that metadata. So there is a learning process if you're coming off of EPMA. Same thing goes for DRM, EDMCS, and EPMware. There is going to be some type of effort to assist you in getting this up and running. All right, so what you're using in EPMA currently, the number of applications and the level of automation is really going to help you understand, what that's going to take. And of course, we're happy to help you make that decision and evaluate what those changes are, based on your usage. So, EPMware may be right for you, DRM Light may be right for you, but we're happy to discuss that and point you in the right direction. So also migrating to Oracle Cloud. Now, again, if you're thinking about adding PBCS or FCCS applications or ARCS applications to your landscape, you're going to want to make sure that you do have the capability of seamlessly managing that cloud metadata along with your existing Hyperion on-premise application set. So EPMware does that as well. So you can have HFMS-based planning, PBCS, all in one request. So a user logs in, creates a new member, and we can push that member out to all of those applications, including the cloud applications in one shot. So that's kind of a pretty big benefit of using EPMware. It's completely technology agnostic. And if you had to create a custom adapter too, you have the capability of doing that. So I have a question. So it says, hi, is it possible to upgrade my Essbase 11.1.2 to EPMA? If you can share the steps to do it. So I think you're saying to EPMware. So that's a good question. So we do have a customer right now who used EPMware to migrate to the latest version of Essbase. And so that is possible. You can easily import your metadata into EPMware, and then you can use EPMware's target adapter to push that metadata out to your new Essbase application. And this specific example used it for 19C. So what that avoided is having to upgrade your existing Hyperion environment up to the latest patch set of 11.124. Sorry, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but in order to be able to take that upgrade path over. So, happy to discuss that offline if it makes sense. So let's jump into a application in EPMware, and we can kind of walk you through some examples. And again, feel free to just kind of type in any questions that you might have along the way. So here, what I'm doing is I'm going into our demo instance of EPMware. Of course, we do support single sign-on as well. So we'll do a quick walkthrough of some of the major items and developments, the features that are available. Here, of course, when I log in, I do see my dashboard, and I'm just going to find a good request here. There we go. Just bear with me. Here we go. All right, great. So on the left, we've got our sidebar. Has all the modules. These modules are, of course, can be turned on or off with security. Typically, most end users are going to see just the first three modules. So it's the dashboard, which we see here. Also, we have an Explorer, which allows us to simply just browse metadata without making any changes. So you can give a broader audience the ability to look at metadata without having the access to change it. Also, the create request. So if I want to initiate a change in EPMware, I'm going to just click on this metadata request, and it'll create a brand new request tab, and I can start making my changes. All right, and that's what we'll really focus on today. So here I'm clicking on a request, and I can see the visual progress of this request within the workflow. I can see that this request is in a has completed its review stage, and it's also now going to an approval stage. I can see that Sam and Charles have also logged in, and they've approved the changes, or they've reviewed the changes. So in EPMware, a review stage in a workflow allows you to make some changes to a request. It allows you to change some properties, add a shared node to an alternate hierarchy that a user has already submitted. The next stage is the approve stage, which allows us to simply review or approve metadata. So this doesn't allow us to make any changes, but it allows maybe business users or other user groups to log in, take a look at the change, and either accept it or reject it. Now, of course, these stages, you can create any number of these instances. You can create the approval as the first stage, which is probably commonly done. And then, of course, we see multiple different deploy stages here. I can see that there's a deploy to UAT, then a production approval, and then deploy to prod. So if you do have deployment to UAT as a requirement within your metadata workflow, you can use EPMware to push the changes in that request over to UAT. And then once the business logs in here and approves that metadata change, EPMware will push that change directly to production when we're ready. The good part about that is we're only going to deploy what we deploy to UAT. So from audit and controls perspective, we're sure that exactly what we deploy to UAT is exactly what we're deploying to prod. We don't have to worry about differences or changes between those two environments. And that's a pretty common point of errors that can be introduced within business as usual process. Personally, I've seen that quite a bit, where changes that are in UAT don't make it exactly to prod as they're supposed to, just because it's, sometimes there's a lot of changes, and it is quite a bit of work when you're managing a large number of applications to get that over to production in the right way. So again, sensitive changes, but we need to make sure that we make them incrementally and as correct as possible to production. So once this change is complete, of course, EPMware does understand that this has been successfully deployed to prod. And I'll show you exactly what this looks like within that request. So let's go over to our request, and let's go and create a brand new metadata change. So as an end user, I log in and I see this request screen. I'm going to log in to set up a due date. Let's create a description, click a priority, workflow. We'll pick a workflow, or we can even have a workflow set for us. I'll hit the save button over here, and now I can pick an application. We'll pick a BSO application as starting point for my metadata, and pick a dimension. And over on the left, I can now browse into my hierarchy. And as I browse in this hierarchy, I can click over here, and I can right click. And this allows us to create transactions within the application. So you have things like create member as a child, insert a member from another application. You can add a shared member, remove a shared member, reorder children, edit properties. And so a lot of these changes can be, transactions can be turned on or off depending on the security of the user. So if you're an end user or you have EPMware deployed to an end user, we can restrict this view to hide some of these technical properties so that the end user simply is able to come in, create a brand new member, and not take any more transactions where we need to. And of course, the validations that run in real time in EPMware allow us to have a customized experience so that if I'm not supposed to be creating metadata under assets, then EPMware will warn me and tell me that I don't have access to create metadata within this hierarchy. So all of that in terms of validations can be customized, and we can tailor the workflow experience for the user as needed. So let's go in here. Let's create a brand new member. Let's call this one 004 001P, and we'll hit enter. And of course, the first validation kicks in right away. This member already exists. And the standard validations that we include are, invalid characters, special characters, member name, alias, duplicate members. All of that is out of the box. So these are typically validations that that most folks would actually run after creating the metadata within, either Excel or whatever they would have. And this is, that would take quite a bit of time. So now you can create metadata changes or allow the business to initiate these metadata changes. And those validations will run on the fly. And so when they run on the fly, you really don't even need to have those run by anyone down the road. Here, you can see that we've created a brand new member. I can see exactly where that member is going to roll up in my hierarchy. Over here on the right, I can see properties that are populated. Of course, if these are hidden down the road, when we deploy it, the only thing we're going to be responsible for is populating an alias. And of course, the alias, as it's populated, will have to go through the same level of validation checks as soon as we hit the save button. Now we can see two things have happened here at the top. One, the line has been created in this BSO application. And also down below, we also have a second line that was auto-created by EPMware. So we've told EPMware that we need a member in the ASO application whenever something is created in BSO. So as part of the application configuration, we've created a mapping. Now this mapping is a simple synchronization of these two hierarchies. But you can have a synchronization relationship or a script-based relationship. And if it's a script-based relationship, we can use our logic builder to write logic to take any type of action between these two applications. And that means that if I have a member that's created here in my BSO application, and I want it to roll up to a different place in my ASO, or I have a different member naming convention in my ASO application, I can do that as well. And so EPMware will follow that member naming standard that I've defined in my script, my logic, or even a lookup table to derive what that member name or the position of that member should be. There's a lot more complex examples that we can demonstrate as well. Automatically creating members in alternate hierarchies. When this is submitted, asking users to enforce that they've created members under alternate hierarchies. So depending on what the workflow process is, this is where we can tailor the process to match what the organization needs. Now, here we can also do a bulk upload, of course, to push metadata to the target apps here directly in the hierarchy without having to right click and update those. So I can just create 500,000, 10,000 lines. We've had customers even architect entire hierarchies within a bulk upload format, and EPMware will load those up. You'll see those all reflect here into your production view. And then you'll also see the mapping take place at the same time with the validation. So you're creating hierarchies from multiple different applications just with one request form. So pretty powerful if you have to maintain metadata for multiple different applications. Once this is done, we can simply submit this into the workflow, and EPMware will start notifying folks that are assigned in my workflow process that they have to log in. They need to take a look at the hierarchy. They may need to enrich some properties or add new members. And so they'll be able to simply do that by making those changes or hitting the approve or reject button when they're ready for that stage. Finally, once we're done, we can get to the deployment engine, and the deployment engine can have a either automatic or scheduled or a ad hoc deploy process. So here we do know what deployment is running, so you can you'll be able to see that 2206 is running, when it started, when it ended, the success or failure of that. We can also see the status of that, and that'll reflect in the request. So we go back to the request, you'll see that this has turned from red into gray to denote that that member is successfully live in that target application. You can also see the log files that were used to communicate with the API, and of course the actual log that was communicating with the API. So if there's any type of issue, you'll see that it failed, and you'll be able to see in this log exactly why it failed. We can also configure an attachment directly to an email that will email the administrator to let them know what was in that log file and why it successfully deployed or why it failed. So you can see whether it was a communication error or issue, or what was the exact reason of the failure. And that's the opportunity for us to either make some changes to validations as we evolve through our governance process. All right, so let me just go back over to our webinar and let's see if there are any questions. What we didn't see today are some validations, but I want to leave some time for some questions. Of course, let me just refresh our question box and see if there's anything here. All right, I'll just give it a minute or so. If there's any questions, please feel free to just kind of type in the question and answer box. All right, so one thing we didn't mention were some of the reports that are also available, and we're happy to show you those on a demo if you'd like to see those. You can just reach out to us, and we're happy to walk you through some more detailed examples of what we've done, what we've created in the past for our customers, and also if there's a requirement for proof of concept, we're happy to show you what your hierarchies look like in EPMware and how they deploy. So I don't see any questions coming up, so I think we can wrap up for the day. So thanks everybody for joining. It's happy to have you guys on the phone, and if you have any questions, you can go to EPMware.com or even reach out to me. My email address is abhi@epmware.com. Take care. Thank you. Have a great day and stay healthy.